But let's get started. So we have about 50 minutes. Like I said, we're going to start with addressing or at least talking about what is it that we are hearing from our community, from people like you. We have a active email inbox where people are writing in. I've also been meeting with a few people to understand what's going on and having such conversations. So based on that, I'm going to address some questions. We're going to go through some details regarding the challenge. Based on those FAQs, we're going to focus specifically on certain aspects so that it's clearer. Then after that, we're going to talk about what a strong application looks like, right? I think because each of such call to actions can be different, and each organization that hosts it can have different goals. So what does a strong application look like for us? And then we're going to open it for Q&As. So hopefully the first part of it we can go through real quick. June, can we go to the FAQ slide? Okay, what are we getting asked a lot, right? I think the most frequent one that we've read in the last 4 weeks at least is about eligibility. Eligibility from projects like my project is in this stage. Am I eligible? This is like we used to be a non-profit and then we became a for-profit. Are we still eligible? The way that our organization is set up is a little complex. Are we still eligible? We don't even have an office. We are a virtual organization. So are we eligible? So I think a little bit about that. And I think we are also getting questions about, okay, how exactly do I go about submitting a strong application, right? And okay, there is a part about operational sustainability and future plans. What exactly does go into those fields, right? I'm not sure. And what might be the process of submitting an application, like, because you start here and then you're taken to another platform which looks different. So yeah, we are here to answer all of these questions and anything else that you have in mind. So let's start with some basic details about the challenge, right? I know most of you will know about this, but essentially the Green Changemakers challenge is designed with a vision of a world where every person can contribute. Basically, we are focusing on a world that is not just sustainable, but can also be equitable, in the sense that people who are most affected by climate change and will be affected by transitions in climate action should not be left behind, right? So it's a world where every person can contribute and nobody gets left behind. June, do you want to switch over to the next one? Okay, so how do we define a green change maker? So the green change maker is anybody who recognizes humanity's role within nature and works to create a more regenerative and equitable world, right? So I think what we are trying to say by this is we are looking at a green change maker as someone who is reframing the idea of humanity's role within nature, right? So I think it's not humanity and nature, but it's humanity within nature, right? They're highly intertwined entities, and of course they build solutions for a world where that is sustainable as well as equitable, right? These two put together make someone a green change maker based on our definition. June. Okay, so what exactly are we looking for? In terms of solutions, we are looking for, June, could you go through all of these just in case I don't miss it? Okay, cool. I think we are looking at 3 types of solutions. One is a type of solution, and this is where we are getting a lot of applications in at this point, where people are creating inclusive pathways for others to contribute. So these could be people who are marginalized, people who are most affected by climate change, but essentially pathways for people to contribute to climate action and any action towards making a sustainable and equitable world, right? I think about 50 to 60% of our current submissions are in this category. The next one is turning data and information into stories. In here, we are looking at people who are using knowledge and data as a construct to basically be like, hey, this is what our data and knowledge is telling us. So let's do something about it, right? So that kind of work. And the last one is people who are supporting other climate innovators and providing structures of support for them, right? So as you can see, maybe a lot of your work is sort of covering maybe all three of these categories or more than one of this category, or maybe even none of this category, right? So hopefully you can help, we can help you clarify some of that, because sometimes at Ashoka, we can be a little vague and not so straightforward about the way we explain things, but hopefully we can course correct as we do this session. June, do you want to go to the next one? Great. So in terms of eligibility, going to spend a little more time on this. So in terms of eligibility, there are two main reasons why we've marked a lot of our applications as ineligible so far, right? As part of early entry and all of that. One, I think we've seen a lot of people apply who do not have, who have a program, who have an idea, who have a framework of how they might go about a certain solution, but they do not have any kind of a pilot or initial implementation, right? And if you do not have an initial or pilot implementation, it means that you will not have any impact metrics to show for the submission that you made, right? So a lot of our ineligible tags for current applications have been because of that. And also we are seeing new initiatives from larger organizations, right? Like, for example, we saw someone from the World Economic Forum apply to this, right? And I think for us, it's very clear that we don't want to support, at least at part of this challenge, we don't want to support people who are already have a long history of operations, right? If you already have a long history of operations, you've been operating for more than 6 years, and then you have something that started within the last 2 years, it still means that you have a advantage over somebody else who's just started out, right? And that's the reason we are not accepting new initiatives from larger organizations. And in this case, we are defining a larger organization as anybody who's operated over 6 years, right? So we are looking at ventures that are early stage, that is beyond their idea stage to some level of implementation, up to organizations that have operated for about 6 years, right? That's the main criteria because of which we've had to say no to a lot of people. Apart from that, we are accepting applications from about 34, not about 34, exactly 34 countries around the world. And I think most of you will be part of one of these countries. In terms of incorporation, I think it's okay. We are okay that if your organization is not incorporated, but I think in your future plans, you need to mention that you're close to incorporation. June, do you want to go to the next one? Cool. Evaluation criteria. Great. So as you know, we recently completed our early entry review process, and we've ourselves had quite a bit to learn from our own sort of evaluation framework. But I think it worked. It works for us. I hope you feel the same as well. If you don't, feel free to express it so that we can help clarify. So in terms of evaluation, there are 5 things that we focus on. The first one is connection and commitment. Here, what we are looking at is your personal, June, I think you need to, hope the explanation. Yeah, okay. So here we are focusing on 2 things, right? One is how closely are you working with the community for whom you're solving this problem, right? Are you sitting behind a desk and just putting a solution out there without actually interacting with people, or are you actually working really closely with the community, or are you yourself part of that community who's affected by the problem? The second one that we're looking at is what about this, within connection commitment, the second part is what about this problem drives you, right? What, like Jarida said, what makes you want to get up from your bed in the morning, for instance, right, to solve that problem? What is your personal connection to the problem, for instance, right? The second one's also quite interesting. This talks to a little bit about not how this is about activating green change making. And this talks to how are you not only solving a sustainability problem, but how are you also influencing other people to shift their mindset about climate change and sustainability, right? How are you enabling them to sort of take action in their own context, right? Not just be like, okay, I did this and I reduced 100 tons of carbon from going into the atmosphere, which is great, which falls right under the impact category, and you are definitely helping create a net zero world. But are you also helping multiply the number of change makers and green change makers that are out there, right? That's our second one. The third one is evidence about the work that you're doing. Like I said, because impact is an important evaluation criteria, you need to have some evidence for the work that you've done, and demonstrate that the work that you're doing is contributing to a net zero world. In terms of innovation, there are two angles. The first angle is that it's innovative by itself because it's one of its kind, right? That's one type of innovation. The other type of innovation that we're looking at is innovation in context, right? So you may not have be the first person to think about this, but in your context, it may be a new idea, right? So I think for innovation, we are considering both those angles. For operational viability, there are a couple of things, maybe more than a couple of things, but essentially here, the question that you need to ask yourself is, as an organization, if I want to continue surviving, what is my plan for it, right? That is operational viability. This can be money, this can be collaborations, this can be partnerships, this can be anything that helps you survive and operate as an organization, right? So that is operational viability, and all these 5 criteria have equal weightage when your application gets reviewed. And right now, what we are seeing is a lot of people are missing out on the activating green change makers bit. I think they're not able to maybe talk about it in the way that it's needed. So we are here to help. But I think otherwise we are seeing pretty good responses. June, next. I guess it's you. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. And sorry for the delay in skipping. It's like answering the chat and then my PowerPoint just bugging a little bit. But anyway, technical difficulties. But yeah, so I think that's a question that probably you all already know the answer to, because that's why you're here and that's why you want to apply. But obviously there's something in it for you. And we do want to emphasize that we view this as a lot more than just, oh, it's a challenge and then there's going to be a bunch of winners at the end that get money. Like, that's not the way we perceive a challenge. We really view this as a journey for you all, and there's a lot that you can gain from it. With the first thing, which is even starting in an info session like this one, is connection. So because as an applicant to this challenge, you get to be part of a community of green change makers that are also activating other change makers. And so just by default and by participating into this challenge, you get to build a strong network and you get to connect with peers who are doing the same sort of like impactful work as you are doing across the 34 countries that are eligible. You also get to win learning and support from participating in this challenge, because at every stage of the challenge, you're going to get feedback. So if you've already applied for the early entry deadline, you should have already gotten feedback. For any of you that apply by the final deadline, you're going to get feedback, whether you make it as a semi-finalist or not. And this feedback will both be from the Ashoka community, but also from the HSBC community, along with any reviewers that we've engaged. So your application will be reviewed by internal reviewers, but also by each other. So you can also get to provide feedback and learn from each other and connect with each other. And as you may know, winners will also get to go through an Ashoka systems change journey, where you learn how to develop your own systems change strategy. Funding. So there are 3 early entry winners, which will be announced next week, will win $1,500 each. And then final winners to the challenge can win up to $25,000 for at least $15,000. And of course, finally, you get recognition. So as you go along this journey, you'll be celebrated and uplifted through Ashoka's network. And so that will, I guess, will give you more visibility, and the winners specifically will be showcased through our platforms and through other sort of online presence. But yeah, take some time. Timeline. That's already on our website, but we've launched on March 1st. The early entry prize deadline was on March 29th, and the final entry deadline is next Wednesday, so on April 26th at 5 p.m. UTC. So UTC is Universal Time. So just make sure that you know what time that is for you. It's at 5 p.m. It's not midnight or anything. And it's next Wednesday. Then a bit over a month later, which is the time we need to go through your applications, review them, and write our feedback. We will announce the semi-finalists on May 31st. If you are a semi-finalist, you get to refine your application. So based on the feedback that you've received, you get to go through your application and answer a couple more questions, but also edit the questions that you've answered before. And then there's a second review round, after which on July 5th, we announce finalists. Then there's a judges panel with a bit of an interaction with judges, and the winners will be announced in August. And after that, there's for all the winners, there's an engagement beyond that, which will include a systems change journey, potentially some mentorship. But yeah, that will be announced later on. But yeah, that's a bit about the timeline. Now, we've gotten some questions about where can I apply and what's the technicality of it. I'm not going to go through it in detail right now because it's always easier to look through it yourself. We'll send you this deck, we'll send you the recording. But this is sort of the steps of really where can you apply. If you're having any technical difficulties, this is where you click, etc. So I'm just going to skip through that. Now to a part that might not be that present on our websites, but could be helpful for you all, which is what makes a strong application. And so here we've kind of built this little checklist for you all to know if your application is a strong one. What you see as the green check marks is what is essential for your application to even be considered as a strong application. And what is in yellow is what you need to have at least some of and you need to do well in. So the first column is your organization eligible. That's what Ervind has explained, but it's really key here that you check all of the boxes, because if you're ineligible, we won't read your application. We will not provide feedback because we will consider this as an ineligible application. So make sure that you put if you've been in existence for less than 6 years, make sure you put the right date, because if you put the wrong date, there's a high chance we will just exclude you from the pile, along with all the other eligibility criteria. So make sure that you're eligible, that you check all the boxes. Make sure that you answer our framing question, which is sort of what we've been explaining, which is how might we equip every person with the mindset and capability to contribute towards building a sustainable world where no one is left behind and everyone can thrive. So that's when we're talking about activating green change makers, when we're talking about catalyzing others to step up and be change makers as well. And this, checking this box is really important for us to see that you are an aligned application, that you are a strong one to consider. And then the next two, they're orange check boxes because it'll be, at least for the third one, it'll be difficult to check them all, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. So we have 3 focus areas, which are creating inclusive pathways for people to contribute, turning data into information and information into stories that spark actions, and creating structures of support for existing solutions. You might fall into only one of those, which is great. You know, we're looking, those sort of are the 3 avenues that we've identified as ways to answer that framing question. Don't feel the pressure to demonstrate all 3 of those. If, you know, your innovation is really focused on, you know, what I do is I turn data and information into stories that spark action. And that's how I'm equipping every person with the mindset and capability to contribute. Then make sure that this is what you emphasize, right? But you need to at least fall into one of these 3 focus areas. But of course, by nature, you might fall into one more because they're very interconnected and you can't isolate them, of course. And finally, there's the 5 evaluation criteria, which you will be ranked on. And as Aravind said, there is equal rating on each of them. So, you know, you might have a very, very strong impact, but I don't know, you don't at all activate green change makers. You probably won't fare that well because you will score low on the activating green change makers. But yeah, these are the 5 evaluation criteria. The better you score on them, the better your total score will be. But yeah, of course, there's certain things that you might do a bit better than others. Now I'm going to quickly take you through strong applicants. I'm aware of the time and the fact that we want to leave most of the time for you all to ask questions. But here are a couple of examples of applicants that we've identified as strong applicants. They're not eligible for the challenge for one reason or the other, which is why they're here, because we didn't want to create any biases. But this organization, they're called Arctic Eider Society. They're based in Canada, and they fall under the focus area of creating inclusive pathways for people to contribute. The work that they do is really that they're giving space in the conversation to a community, which is the Inuit community, that is closest to nature and thus to the problem. So the work that they do is sort of centering the voice of these communities and their knowledge and translating their oral culture into valuable scientific data on environmental change. And they do that through this social networking application. And that's a really interesting application. And they would do quite well on especially 3 of our evaluation criteria. The first one being connection and commitment, because this social networking application is built, the whole organization actually is built by Inuits and for Inuits. So it has a very strong connection to the community. It is informed by the community for the community, and it has a very strong involvement of that community and participation. So in that way, we would very highly rank that criteria. They also rank very highly on activating Green Changemakers, because their work is allowing so it's not just allowing, but it's also equipping these community members to be Green Changemakers, because they hold the knowledge and therefore they lead the conversation on the impact of climate change in the Arctic, which they're experiencing firsthand and they're experts in. And by creating this knowledge sharing, it's giving all the users of this platform the tools to make more informed decisions when they're taking care of their own land. So people are contributing and learning at the same time, being able to be Green Changemakers in both ways. And finally, their impact is quite strong. They've got 4,000 users across the Arctic, lots of posts, but it's not even about the numbers of how many posts and users they have. It's really about sort of the human and qualitative impact that they're having on individuals. And one quick note that obviously they have 4,000 users. They are they're a bit more of an advanced organization. So we don't expect you to have those crazy numbers. That's why they're actually ineligible, because they're a bit too advanced. And another example is called 2811, which is an organization that activates and strengthens ecosystems of social innovation. So their work is a bit more in the focus area of building structures of support for existing solutions. And their whole model is based around the idea that people and organizations need to have the tools and like the infrastructures to be agents of change. So their whole approach, they have a big focus on a regenerative approach. It's a holistic approach to climate change. And they work on projects that aim to sort of rebuild the environment with a focus on not just ecological, but also social and economic aspects. And so we kind of view that they fare well on specifically, oh, this is wrong. I apologize. The text on this slide is wrong. We'll make sure to change it before we send it out. But you can ignore what you see and just listen to what I'm saying, which is this organization does really well in activating Green Changemakers and innovation. So those are the two strong criteria. On activating Green Changemakers, it's because they have this belief that activating an ecosystem and enabling people will allow them to achieve their full potential as change makers. And that's what they're doing. They're in that part of activation and enabling through capacity buildings, but also through connections. And they also do very well in innovation because their approach is super innovative because they bring a whole new perspective into the conversation. They're connecting people to each other and they're building capacity. But as I said, they also have this really big focus on regenerative approach, which is something that if you've looked at our evaluation criteria, is something we very particularly value. They're activating solutions that they don't just contain the damage, which would be a good approach, but the regeneration piece of it is that they're actually reversing the damage that's being done to the planet. And those are the solutions that they support. And they have a perspective of this oneness with nature, of we're not interacting with nature, but we are nature, which is a very innovative and new perspective and holistic perspective to have on climate. Now, I know I've talked quite a bit. I think this is the end of my part. It's your turn to ask us your questions. I can see a few things in the chat. I know there was already a couple of questions, but yeah, Arvind, you can go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, I think it's the forum is open. You can use the raise hand feature to go ahead and ask the question, and it's first come, first serve. So go for it. The floor is yours. Maybe we can start with, if people are still hesitant about raising their hands, we can start with some of the questions that we see in the chat. Okay, Scott, there you go. Go for it.
So I'm trying to understand why bringing everybody along is important, because I just can't figure out if it's a strategy or if it's a social justice value, or and I would tailor my responses differently if I understood what that was about.
Jarida, you want to take that? I think it's under your alley of just transition.
Yes, okay. So this is the best way I can put it. So for us to reverse the changes that we can see in climate, or the damage that has been done to nature and climate, we need to create a world where every person can contribute to building a better world. So if your solution is not empowering other people to step into that reality, then it will be very hard for us to get to the next step, because it will just depend on you and your work, but it won't be empowering others to step into their own role as problem solvers and reach the next mile. So that's why the activating Green Changemakers bit is powerful, because you are empowering other people to not see themselves as victims but of like their circumstances, but as problem solvers. Yeah, so that's why the activating Changemakers bit is powerful, or is needed.
Is this a good way to paraphrase that? That having the potential to activate more people rather than fewer is probably desirable, and that you're looking for a magnifier effect.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sarah, before we get to you, there's a quick question from Michelle in the chat. It's a very important question. It says, when you say zero carbon, does it talk about only carbon impacts? Are you also talking about water and biodiversity and all that? June, Jada, correct me if I'm wrong, but no, we're not just looking at projects that are just oriented to carbon credits and if carbon sequestration, for that matter. I think we're looking at anything that's sustainable, green, sustainable, restorative, the whole schmang of things. June, Jarida, do you want to add anything to that?
No, you answered it right. We're not looking for carbon focused organizations at all. That's just if any sort of climate innovation would eventually lead to a zero carbon world, as long as it can demonstrate climate impact. So we're looking for impact that's both quantitative and qualitative, and we're not at all focused on carbon focused, or carbon focused innovations or solutions.
Cool. Dela, we'll get to your question in a bit, but Sarah, go for it.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for having this moment for us to ask our question. My question is about the eligible criteria, because the Café Apuí initiative that I am the leader of started with an NGO, but we started a company in 2019 for the price values And we are trying to prove with our company that other companies can do the same in self-sustainable development in them. So the project started 10 years ago with the NGO. However, the company that I'm the director started in 2019. So would it be considered eligible?
June, do you want to take that question? I think it's an interesting one. But did you get the situation?
The sound was a bit iffy, but is it that?
Okay, so I can try to explain. So basically, the project that Sarah is part of started 10 years ago, but the company that she's part of was registered, and the one that's taking the project forward was registered in 2019. So it's a little bit of a gray area. So in this case, I guess we are looking at the incorporation date rather than the project start date. What are we looking at?
I would say, yeah, is that correct, Sarah? Is that you first implemented 10 years ago, but you only registered in 2019?
It's kind of difficult to explain. We can also talk later maybe, because we have like an innovative arrangement here of a company and an NGO. The first implementation was 10 years ago, but we didn't have the whole process, the whole chain of value, because we didn't have someone to purchase the coffee that we help the producers to produce. And we only invented the company in 2019. So now we sustain the whole sustainable value chain since the implementation to the purchase and sale of the coffee. So now we are trying as a company to be an example, not only in implementing the agroforest systems, but also for the purchase and the selling of sustainable goods in the market.
I mean, sorry, just we can also continue this conversation via email, but just a quick question. When thinking about the impact question, would your impact be demonstrated just from the past 4 years, or is it impact that you've been creating for the past 10 years?
I could do both. Of course, the impact became stronger after we had the company, and we are helping them to generate income. But it's also a production of what we planted before, but we're also implementing new areas now with a different system as a company now, with other challenges.
I think let's continue this conversation via email. I think it would also be helpful to hear a bit more of the details of it, but definitely a very particular scenario. Definitely,
okay,
email. You have the email. I'm going to share it again in the chat, but email
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Kat, do you want to go for it? Dela will still get your question after Kat.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone. So really interesting to hear about the eligibility and the overall program. And I just wanted to check on something around eligibility. So I have a relatively newly founded sort of 9-month-old social enterprise, and we're delivering a relatively new sort of green innovation challenge in schools. So all of that, so there are sort of 4 of us small partner organizations actually delivering that. So I just wanted to check that wouldn't, and they're all actually relatively, they would all be within the 6 years in terms of incorporation anyway. But I just wanted to check that it's okay to be kind of, I guess we're broadly a collective delivering it, but I'm the kind of main delivery partner. Is it okay to apply in that setting, or would we be ineligible because it's kind of a collective, I guess, delivering?
No, I think we are, as far as I know, we are okay with collectives. There are a few collective projects that have come our way. And as long as the main recipient of the grant fits within the eligibility criteria, even though you're part of a collective, you would be receiving the grant, assuming you win it, you would be receiving the grant. So in that particular scenario, transactional scenario, eligibility is a very transactional aspect of it, right? So I think in that transactional scenario, you would still be eligible. Collectives are fine.
Yeah, and there isn't any sort of part 2 is there aren't any, in terms of, there aren't any issues with there being funding from other sources in to it, are there?
As long as you've not been funded, you're not currently not being funded by HSBC, we are okay.
No, no, definitely not.
So when we do our due diligence towards the end, we would be checking if any of the potential grant winners are currently being funded by HSBC or its partners or its JVs. So I think in that scenario, we just want to make sure that you're already not currently being funded by HSBC in any way, which is
Absolutely not.
FI HSBC is our partner for this challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Let's get to Dela's questions in the chat. Let me try to read the first one. Can the innovation be using an existing technology to apply it to climate solutions in a way that it's both inclusive and expanding group of creators and other green? Yes, I think this speaks to one of the innovation criteria that we mentioned, Dela, is we call it innovation in context. It means that it's not necessarily a new product or solution by itself, but it's new in the context of it, in the context that it's being applied. So yes, the innovation can be using an existing technology. That's right. Your second question is, in such an early stage project, do we need to show how we can measure future impact? Okay, there are a couple of things there, right? So when I think how we define it is, I think if your project is anything that's beyond an idea, where you've been able to test your prototype or your minimum viable solution, it means that you have some level of feedback from your community or the people that you're working with, right? So this could be 10 people, this could be 20 people, 100 people, whatever the size of your pilot was, right? So I think for us, it's very important that a project at least meet that criteria, right? You need to have some level of pilot implementation. In terms of future impact, yes, I think it's good to talk about future plans. I think there's a section called future plans, where you can talk about how many more people are you looking to reach. Like, for example, if your impact says we've reached 100 people and this is what has happened, your future plans can indicate what you want to do. So that's one part in terms of volume. The other part I think you're also asking is the methodology of the impact itself, right? Like, okay, how are you going to measure future impact? I think that can also be included in your future plans and operational and viability plans, because for somebody who's reading through your application, it'll give a good idea that, okay, the person who's behind this project is actually serious about impact, right? And that can in turn lead to a higher score in the impact criteria. Hopefully that answered your question, Dela. I think you're still around, but if you want to raise your hand and ask a question or you can feel free to continue to put in the chat if that works better for you. Up to you. June, it feels like you want to say something.
Can I quickly add something just around the impact question? Because I feel like it's often viewed as like, oh, what are the numbers or what is the methodology that I'm going to follow? And of course that is important, but know that when we want to see evidence of scale and impact of the work that you're doing, it's both quantitative but also qualitative. Like, I think there's a lot of value if you've just run one pilot, right? Or if you've done just you've only implemented at a small scale. You don't want to say, oh, I've impacted only 20 people, but the quality of the impact and the way you have impacted these people's lives, or the way that you've created something new or impacted the environment, that is really important. And we want to see that. In the end, it's us, it's other people that are going to be reading your applications. We want to feel inspired and we want to be like, wow, this is really making a change. That's what we want to see. And we want to obviously a change for the better. So yeah, we want to see that something has been done. We don't want to just see the numbers of like, oh, this is how we're going to do X, Y, Z, and we're going to reduce carbon emissions by this amount. Like, that's important, but it's not just that. Yeah, I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Vincent, go for it.
My question is pretty simple. So is there a limit as to the number of times you can edit your application? And secondly, in regards to how you're being able to create and enable other people to be change makers. Now, for instance, my my innovation is around redesigning fashion. So there's one part that you engage the community, and also there's a way that you want to create fashion that has these statements on climate change and has these messages. So is that something that can be mentioned and added, or do we just need to mention about how we impact the community and not through the products that we create, if they also have a message to communicate? Thank you.
In terms of editing the application, now until the final entry window closes, which is April 26th, 5 p.m. UTC, or I think it's also known as GMT in other places. You'll be able to find the details on our website anyway. Until until then, you can edit your application any number of times, and that is something that's there. And if you are facing any technical difficulties while editing, we are here to help. The second part of your question, I can try to answer it, but June, Jarida, feel free to jump in. I think in terms of activating other change makers, I think a lot of the people who applied, how they've responded is, yes, we activate Green Changemakers, and these are the people who we are activating, right? I think it's as somebody who's reviewing your application, what they want to see is not exactly proof, but what is the pathway or logic that you're using to activate change makers, right? If the question is, okay, how are you acting change makers? And if your response is, we are activating change makers by empowering so-and-so people in my community. But what is the pathway or logic that you're using to do that, for instance, right? I think that is what will help you tell your story, because for a reviewer, it will start making sense as to how you're going about it. You don't need to talk about every singular specific aspect of your products or work that you're doing, but like a pathway or a logic model that you're using to activate change makers. That's what we want to see in the application. We want to see who you are helping and how you're going about it, broadly from a logic perspective. June, Jarida, you want to add anything to that?
Okay, maybe something I can share as a cheat sheet is, if you want to think about, or you are thinking about, how am I activating other green change makers, look at the focus area. That will be a very good guide on how you're doing it. Are you creating, is your solution or your initiative creating inclusive pathways? Now, when you answer that, like, how are you doing that? That will be a very sure way of showing how you are activating green change makers. If you are using data and insights and turning that into storytelling for change or for green change making, then when you answer the how, when you answer that as the how are you doing that, then you will have addressed how you are activating green change makers, because the ideas will show how you are helping others through that focus area step into their role as green change makers. So yes, that's almost like a cheat sheet. Look at the focus area, one of the any of the focus areas. If you address all of them well and good, highlight how you are showing or you are helping people identify or step into their role as green change makers through with the guide of now the focus areas. I had another point, but I think I've talked too much and it's sort of evaporated. I'll leave it in the chat if it comes up.
Cool. Kat, we still see your hand up. Is it from before, or do you have a follow-up?
Another one, a kind of a follow-up.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, because I've only just sort of discovered this today, so I'm probably asking questions that people had figured out months ago or weeks ago at least. So I've not actually looked into any of the application material yet. So it was about So I think one of the things that's really interesting about this isn't just the funding, but it's also the network and the kind of support that's on offer. But when you're talking about the kind of what the impact would be of the Ashoka investment, I guess, and if that would be in terms of what we're aiming to do next year, but obviously we've still got to get kind of funded and things, would just be a part of that. How are you expecting us to communicate the impact of that if what Ashoka would be doing, would be funding if you were to move forward as a part of that, rather than the ambition for, I guess, the next stage as a whole? Does that make sense? Attribution, I guess.
June, Jarida, either one of you, I'm still thinking about a response. So if, yeah.
And just to be specific, I guess so we've sort of in the pilot, we've worked with like about 3,000 students across 16 schools. And we would love to work with 50 schools next year, and move into, and it's been all in kind of a mix of demographic areas, and move into some new areas and things. And specifically not working with any private schools at all. So we'd just be keen to sort of understand if it was a part of that, then what would you be looking to see, the bit that might be funded, or what the whole impact would be?
And just a clarification question, that is at the moment, right? You're not asking about impact if you are to win and get the funding.
No, this is if we were to win and get money. So what, and it might be that I don't need to put that in the application form, because I'm sorry, because I've literally not looked through any of it yet, having just discovered it. So it was what you're looking for when it's sort of forward looking in terms of thinking about how to articulate what the hoped for impact would be.
So that won't really determine the way we review your application. Really, it's about the evaluation criteria. I believe there's a section where you can write what your plans. So there's a section where you can write what you plan to do, which is where you would probably elaborate a bit more on that, and which is where we would be like, okay, this is what our funding would contribute to. But it's really more about what you're currently doing. And eventually, if you are to win, we will be sort of doing a follow-up on like measuring the impact of what we've done, both through the network and through the funding, but that is gonna be later stages. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So it's just that a lot of funding things, it's like very specific, and you have to go like, this will deliver this.
No, and the funding itself won't be very we won't be following very closely on, okay, what is the exact breakdown of how you spent the money?
Yeah.
So it's a bit more lenient, as long as we can see that it has contributed to the work that you're doing, like that this is the, for example, the rate at which you are going now, and this is how we've helped you strengthen, deepen, accelerate your impact. We want to just see that impact that the funding has had, but we won't ask for like, oh, you must spend it on exactly this and this and this. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I will now lower my hand.
Did we get to Dela's question, the last question that she had, June, in the chat?
I think
it was
I've answered
about the media. Let's see. Okay, yeah. Cool. Anyone have? I think we are almost at time. So I think feel free to. I'm just putting a link in the chat. We are having a couple more sessions where we are available to support you. So maybe today you've taken in the information, and then maybe you'll have more questions for us in a couple of days. I know it's quite close to our final entry window, but feel free to go through the avenues that we have to support you. I think because the tech itself that we have is not very advanced, we use a lot of human intervention to provide you support, and also it helps us be transparent. So we are available to support you over the next few days until the deadline, until the window closes. So happy to engage with you there as well. But if anyone has more questions, happy to stay a few minutes more as well. So let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining. If you have any more questions, feel free to email us. We're here.
Yes, we are also, I think if you go to the link in the chat, you will be able to see the different avenues through which you can reach us. Whatever is most comfortable for you, we are here to help. So looks like we don't have any other questions. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you June and Jarira for being here as well. And it's always a pleasure to work with you and talk to the community along with you. Makes it easier.
Thank you. Thanks, Arvind.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.